Aloha and hello. Welcome to Holy Matrimony. I'm James Fenimore. That's at James Fenimore _.
And I'm Trisha Fenimore. That's at Trisha Fenimore. You can find the show at Holy Matrimony __.
Today we're brought to you by Sex Ed Reclaimed. Have you ever wondered how to talk to your kids about sex but don't quite have the words? Sex Ed Reclaimed has you covered with age-appropriate content made just for your family. Get curriculum that covers all the hard topics from a faith-based worldview. Kristen Miele has educated tens of thousands of students in multiple countries to encourage organic conversations within families about a gift God created. This education was made for such a time as this, so find your curriculum today at sexedreclaimed.com. All right, today we're talking about reliving arguments.
Yeah. It's a big problem for a lot of couples.
Well, look, do you ever constantly hear the same things over and over and over again?
Do you guys argue about the same thing? Or does it keep coming up?
Super unhealthy, but guess what? We're here to help. So, reliving arguments, what do you think?
I think that we need to first talk about the statistic that 70% of fights between couples are perpetual, meaning that it's about the same thing. So what does that tell you? Is that it was never resolved to begin with.
Yeah.
So I think that that's where we start.
So there's still anger there, there's still resentment there, there's still...
It hasn't been properly done. If it keeps coming up, then it's not over, obviously, and it's not dealt with.
So
but what
we should talk about a difference, though, between reliving an argument and not changing behavior from a previous argument. Those are two different things. So for the people out there that are immediately like, well, I've asked my husband or I've asked my wife to do this a million times. She keeps telling me or he keeps telling me he's going to do it and he still isn't doing it. That's not reliving an argument.
Okay.
That is somebody told you they're going to do something and they're not doing it. Like, here's a great example. If you and I are, let's say we're in an argument and I say something not so nice.
Okay.
We'll call it nasty. And you say that's not acceptable, that's not appropriate, I'm not going to accept that as whatever.
Yeah.
And I say, you're right, I'm sorry, I'm going to work on it, it's not going to happen again, we're in the heat of the moment of an argument. And then we get in another argument 3 weeks later, and the same thing gets said, or something similar gets said, and you say, hey, you told me last time, that's going to stop.
Yeah.
That is not reliving an argument.
That's identifying an active pattern.
Correct.
But by contrast, and this actually was something that happened, although what you said wasn't nasty, I just didn't like it. We had a disagreement on one occasion where he said something I didn't like. I said I didn't like that. And he said, okay, I'm sorry. And I said, I forgive you. And then like a month later, we got into a disagreement about something. And I brought that up. This is a true story. And you actually stopped me.
Well, I didn't... Let's be clear. I didn't say it again.
No. And that, yeah, I brought it up like as just ammo. Yeah, I still want to be right sometimes. Like going back to that very first episode, are you fighting to win or are you fighting for the relationship? In that situation, I may have been fighting to win.
That's a work in progress. That's a work in progress. That we've been working on since day one.
We all are. So anyway, I brought that up and he actually stopped mid-conversation and said, I apologized for that. You said you forgave me. Did you forgive me or did you not? Because if you did, then this isn't fair. But if you didn't, then we need to go back and address it so that you can. And that was really useful. But that's a good example of somebody bringing something up from the past that like was not an active pattern. It was me just trying to,
That would be reliving an argument.
Right.
I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
And I think
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Growth.
Good job.
Growth and progress.
I went through that for a reason. For this podcast, for you.
All things work together for the good. I'll tell you what.
However, I think a lot of times reliving an argument is people that need ammo. So maybe
somebody
wrong.
Made a good point against you, and you're like, yeah, well, that last time.
There's not enough in this bag of an argument for you to pull from. So it's like, let me just go to some
your
archival
arsenal's getting
footage.
your arsenal's getting low.
Yeah. So in that instance, it's I understand why people are doing it. It makes sense, but it's not okay. And it's very damaging.
We've also lost the focus of the argument. Going back to that conversation, is the focus of the argument to make your relationship better, or is it to win? Because if it's to win, then of course you're going to drudge out and parade around all these arguments of the past. And I think we really need to get clear on that.
So why is it damaging when you're reliving an argument?
Well, first of all, as somebody who has a very short attention span, if you bring in a lot of new stimuli into a conversation, I'm going to forget the first thing we were talking about. So like the new argument, the new disagreement won't get resolved because now we're trotting out all the disagreements of the past. So now we're adding to the pile of things that are unresolved in the relationship. So I think that's number one, is the new stuff gets put on the back burner, because as soon as the old stuff comes up, we're all going to engage because that's a script we all know by heart.
Well, it also might, I hate to say it, but kind of enrage the person you're arguing with, right?
It's not going to make things better. That's
so, you know, that
I've never seen that happen.
Now you're getting more fire and
more emotion
out of them, and
grounded spiritual. Yeah.
And we're going to be way further from a resolution.
Yeah.
But also,
you're also reopening wounds.
That's true. And you take that with you, by the way, after the argument's resolved, because it's not resolved, it's ended.
Yeah.
It's on pause.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal distinction.
Yeah, nothing has been resolved. So, and now, okay, we're done fighting. We're back to living our life. That's great. But in the back of my mind, she's going to bring this up again, or he's going to bring this up again, or, you know, and that's what you're thinking. You're just kind of waiting around for that next round. It's like a boxing match. Like, okay, we just finished round 3. Round 4 could be in a week, could be a month, could be tomorrow.
But it's
going to happen.
There's an undercurrent of tension there in the waiting for the next round of it. That's why it's so important to solve it. I also think that it fosters this spirit of unforgiveness where the term "I forgive you" loses its meaning. If somebody says I forgive you and then they bring it up again unpromptedly, like if you don't do the same, like if you're not committing the same crimes as what caused the forgiveness to be needed, then them bringing it up means that them saying I forgive you means nothing.
Which will also then damage the I'm sorry. Because if I'm going to apologize sincerely and wholeheartedly, or I use I, but she's great too. It's not just me.
I'm not the only one offending.
But if I apologize and you forgive me, and then it comes up again, like my I'm sorries are going to get less sincere also. Because I'm not like, I'm sorry, I don't want to be arguing, but like it doesn't carry any weight with you either, because your forgiveness isn't legitimate. So
you'll say I'm sorry just to end the argument, but it's not going to resolve anything.
No, and we're going to still have that feeling of waiting around, that still feeling of unresolvedness, and knowing that this is going to happen again, and that really will rob you of legitimate happiness. Like the feeling of resolution after an argument, the real feeling of resolution after an argument is amazing. And you are robbing yourself of that.
And the relationship.
If you can't get there. Because knowing you have a partner that you trust when they tell you, I forgive you, this is over. Not to say we can't make mistakes, but 90% of the time, knowing that it's over is like a weight off your shoulders. It is such an exhale. It is such a beautiful moment in the relationship, because arguments are going to happen. But if you're one of those couples that we're just ending the argument to go on with our day, and then I know that eventually this is going to come up again. Don't know when, but it's going to come up again. You're never going to feel that intimacy with your partner if you can't do that.
That's a great word for it. I think that what you're describing is we're getting into the real meat and potatoes of longer term marriages, right? So like the first year, we're not, you're not knowing all this. But like as we grow older and as our relationships mature, this is what separates the men from the boys, so to speak. This is what separates the great long-term marriages to the ones that falter and crumble, or the ones that are crumbling and nobody knows what to do about it. Like this is what we're talking about, is true conflict resolution. So how do we resolve it? How do we get there?
So
if nobody's shown you, let's assume you didn't have any example of this growing up, you don't know where to start. You're not in any sort of counseling. Nobody knows. Go. How do we do it?
You had a great example at the top, confronting it in the moment.
I think we do that very well.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously no one bats 1,000, but I think for the most part, both of us do that quite well. And what does that look like? If, let's say, now we're going to reverse it. You're going to be the offender.
Okay.
I don't want listeners to get mad. Let's assume that you brought something up that shouldn't have been brought up because it was a past thing that was resolved or we thought it was resolved. And then what do I say?
So kindly pointing it out. Like you don't have to be like, "Are you out of your mind bringing that up again?"
Yeah,
like,
don't yell.
No,
That's
just
not going to
say,
help.
"Okay, wait. Like pause for a second. You just brought something up that was resolved. Is it?" And you could ask the question that you asked me. I think that's a fair question.
You asked me.
Oh yeah.
Now we're fighting about who's better at.
Fair. But it's, was this resolved or was this not resolved? And listen, your partner in that moment may have the gumption and the energy and the emotion to say, you know what, it wasn't.
I honestly, if I can be candid, I think that's what I said when you asked me that in that instance. And I go, you know what, I still have feelings about it. And what you said in that moment was, okay, I respect that and I want to talk about that. Let's resolve this argument and then we're going to readdress that. But I want to address it. It's important to address it because I want you to feel resolved, was your words to me.
And I think, and that is important. It's pick a lane and stay in the lane. And this is hard because when your emotions are going, sometimes you're just grabbing at things and and you always leave the cupboards open. It's like, well, that's not what we're arguing.
I think that's a good tip though in general is if emotions are high, maybe we take that space, knowing that that's where these things tend to happen.
Yeah.
When people are a little more grounded, they're a little more settled and aligned, like they've had time to pray or think about it, get some space from the situation, almost like mud in a stream, it settles and then you can see things more clearly. So I think that's number one is lower the emotion.
And staying in the lane of the moment or the issue. So pick what you're going to talk about. If it's like, all right, you know what, let's talk about the old stuff now. Let's get that out of the way. Then we'll talk about the new stuff or vice versa. Do not conflate the two. Do not combine the two. That is going to be such a bigger undertaking. Even though you might want to multitask and like, let's just get it all out of the way now. I'm telling you that's not how this works. You have to put an issue to bed, address a new issue, put that to bed, so on and so forth. So keeping a consistent lane with what you're talking about, crucial. So I'm not gonna, personally, I would say let's finish what just happened because it's fresh. Then we'll talk about the old stuff. But listen, if the old stuff is big enough, fine. Okay, talk about the old
stuff's
stuff.
probably not going anher Like you could probably focus on the new thing and crank that out and get it done.
But you have to give your partner the grace to call it out too. A little hard.
Yeah.
A little hard to hear that.
It's tough to stomach that.
Yeah.
Where you're like, you got me. Like when somebody calls it out, like you just brought something up from your partner saying you just brought something up from a previous argument that was resolved. Like we gotta kind of own that and be like, I've been caught. You're right.
I was searching for ammo.
I was getting low.
Yeah. So you have to, and it's hard. You have to give your partner the grace to say that, and you have to have the ears to hear it.
Yeah, and you have to have the courage to call it out nicely in your partner as well. I think sometimes people struggle to speak up for themselves for one reason or another, but it's like your relationship depends on this. Like you need to be able to communicate that to your partner.
Yeah, you
and maybe you talk about it when there's no argument, and because I feel like talking about this when there's an argument, like, oh, we need to implement all these changes and I'm going to call it out. Like this needs to be its own conversation. If you and your spouse struggle with perpetual fights, then in a moment of peace or, presumed peace, you need to have this conversation where it's like, we really want to move forward without this dynamic in our relationship. Here's what we both need to do in the next disagreement to help overcome this.
Yeah. I know we keep saying it's hard, but let's be honest. We're all adults. We're all in relationships. We all have to own it. And we all have to work at this. This isn't just, oh, that's hard. I don't know if I'll be able to do it. No, it's supposed to be hard. Nothing is going to come easy to have a great relationship. The relationship itself will be the easy thing. But these little pockets is when it gets a little hard and you have to own it.
I actually had somebody who I got in a disagreement with a guy I was dating pretty early on, and a friend of mine who'd been married for a while was like, this is the easy part, is like the early date. She was like, if you're having problems now, you're never going to make it, you know, like, and she was married for a while. So she was saying, like what you're talking about, the relationship should be easy. There will be moments that are hard.
Yeah. So the last thing I would say is, and it's actually going to bleed into our next thing, which is how to avoid it, is true forgiveness. You know, how you resolve this is you have to give somebody true forgiveness after a true apology.
Well, an apology, yeah. In this dynamic, yes.
Yeah.
In life, an apology isn't required to give forgiveness.
So
but
this is a relationship.
Yeah.
This isn't some guy on the street. This isn't your boss. This isn't like somebody you
did you wrong in
encounter
sixth
and you
grade.
just want to have peace in your heart.
Yeah.
That's different. Love to talk about that. But in your relationship, you are owed an apology. Not owed like you owe me an apology. That's the trust.
Yeah.
That's the love. That's this.
That's what establishes intimacy.
Correct. So, you know, learning that true forgiveness, that real forgiveness of you're now moving on. Also, how to avoid it. Because if you've now learned true forgiveness, you're not going to bring this up again. Or if you do and you slip, because we all slip, we're all imperfect, and your partner calls it out because you've learned true forgiveness, that you're right. I do forgive you for that. I'm just, you know, pointing out another thing you did wrong so I could, you know, bolster my argument a little bit better.
And hopefully your spouse will forgive you for that.
Yeah. What else? What else on how to avoid it?
I think that, you know, we always need to view issues in our marriage, and I'm preaching to myself here, as a team effort. And this is something that's really important in our relationship, is it's not me versus you. It's us versus what? You know, like the thing of perpetual fighting, or you know, like it's not you versus me. It's us versus the tendency to relive arguments and have a spirit of strife. And when we make it a team effort rather than an adversarial effort, I think that changes the dynamic of the entire thing.
I actually really love that, because when you just said that, something occurred to me. It's like, make the disagreement the focal point, make it your adversary. The disagreement is the adversary. It's not you. It's not me. We're in this together. This disagreement is the adversary
Against us.
And now we may want to approach this disagreement from different areas, and that's what we're trying to resolve. But if you focus on the disagreement and not the person, it's very difficult to bring up past things.
Yeah.
Because I'm not thinking about you, or you're not thinking about me and other things I've done. It's in this moment, you know, I didn't wash the dishes properly, or whatever it is. So if we're focused on the washing of the dishes properly, we're not going to be focused on something. Maybe I got a little too loud the last time, or, you know, maybe you were a little mean the last time. We're not going to bring those things into it because we're purely focused on the disagreement. How do we fix the disagreement? Where can we resolve this? If you're fixated on that, you're not going to be fixated on your partner, and you're not going to then be bringing in old stuff.
Yeah, I think that it's stay focused on the disagreement at hand, practice true forgiveness, and if you don't know what that is, you know, like pray on it and seek some counsel from friends and spiritual leaders and how to do it. It really, it can be a daily practice, a daily journey, depending on the severity of what we're forgiving. But it's like, for me, the grace that you've given me has helped demonstrate to me how to give grace to you. And so sometimes we need to see it, you know, and that's where giving grace to one another can actually be a really selfish thing. You know, like here, you probably thought that like you were doing me a favor by giving me grace. And of course you were, not a favor, but you know what I mean. But really you were doing yourself a service by showing me grace, because then that's what I'm going to bring to you. And we have to remember that it's reciprocal in most healthy relationships, and other things that don't fall into that category we can discuss at a different time.
So now I know this is like a bigger issue on the conflict resolution side. Like, this is really great for, you know, dealing with not bringing up those old conflicts. But if you're having trouble on the conflict resolution side, we touched on it a bit in Fighting Fair. That's our first podcast. So search Fighting Fair. You'll get a lot of good information there. But not all of it.
But I was going to say, if you're interested in a deeper conversation and a deep dive into conflict resolution, they could always DM you too, as a professional coach. Like, he can help you, kind of talk about it more in depth. If you want a deep dive into conflict resolution, a little bit more of what that means if you're really struggling in your relationship, that would be a good outlet, right?
Yeah, absolutely. At James Sonnemore _ on all the socials. You could DM me there. Feel free. I mean, conflict resolution, I have several different frameworks for it. It's a much bigger thing to get through the argument. This is one piece of it, really.
Yeah.
This is like taking your step into a much bigger world of not bringing up older stuff. That is like not step one, but one of the 15 steps of real true conflict resolution. So,
well, I know my approach to conflict and disagreements has changed dramatically since being in a relationship with you. So I can personally vouch for the value of what he shares. It's changed my understanding of what it means to disagree in a relationship and how it can actually be used for the good and for the benefit of the relationship to increase trust and intimacy and ultimately foster an environment of deeper respect for each other.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, you still win most of the arguments. Like, just because I brought some knowledge,
Smart man.
I still lose.
Smart man.
That's true conflict resolution, man.
Prevent.
Just take the L and move on with your life. No. Anyway, I think we buttoned this up nicely, put a little bow on it, and
now it's time for
Answer the Internet.
Let's answer the internet.
All right, here we go. My husband is an incredible father. Sometimes when our 3 kids are misbehaving, he will raise his voice really loudly. It makes me uncomfortable because I didn't grow up seeing that. He says it's no big deal. That's how his parents would discipline him. According to him, it worked. How can we meet in the middle as a couple? All right.
Okay.
What do you think?
So it sounds like they both came from backgrounds that they're willing to vouch for and say that this worked. My first impression is it sounds like he might be getting overstimulated. Like, 3 kids is a lot. We have 2, and I know the noise from the toys and the yelling and the dinner needs cooking and the news is on in the background. There's a lot of stimulation. Add another kid, I can't even imagine. So for me, it sounds like he's meeting an emotional feeling with an emotional response. And so I would almost encourage him, when things are getting very elevated, she might just need to just take the moment and be like, hon, why don't you go in the other room, take a minute, take a breather, sometimes to help. I don't know. I mean, because the thing is that he sounds like he supports it. So. Well,
also, I'm assuming this is real yelling, not that when you accuse me of yelling, I'm not yelling. I'm loud. I'm not yelling. Believe me, we'll all know when I'm yelling.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like it's the content of what he's saying, which is heartening and encouraging for me. Because if he was saying cruel or mean things, that would be the content of what he was saying would be the issue. The issue is the volume. So,
I mean, it's a tricky situation because. One, I'm not hearing it. We're hearing one side of this. But let's assume he's really yelling, right? For the sake of the question and her response. So, if he's scaring the kids, how are they reacting to it? If they're just falling in line and all of a sudden that room is clean, I can tell you that sounds like a good trade-off. But if they're getting afraid and they're carrying it with them after the fact, I think the best way, if that's the case, point that out to him. He sounds like a really good dad. You say he's an amazing father. So if you're going to say, listen, the room got clean, the food got picked up off the floor, and all these other wonderful things happened, but then look at the way your kids are acting afterwards to this dad.
Yeah.
I think he'd have a heart to hear that. No, that's not what we're going to do. That's not how we're going to be parents.
No good parent would want their child to fear them. And we're not talking fear the Lord type of fear. That's a different definition. I'm talking genuine fear, being afraid of a parent. I don't think a good parent wants their child to be afraid of them. I think a good parent would want the respect of their child enough to listen to what they were saying. But like, I don't think a good parent would be like, I want my kids afraid of me.
So a core,
because that's a weird that's a weird power dynamic that isn't healthy, I don't think.
a core memory of mine when I was a kid, I was 5 or 6, and I spilled a drink, and I was at somebody else's house, and it was 2 boys. My parents were there, so I wasn't like scared, but it's always stuck out to me. And I spilled a drink, and when I tell you, like, their faces just like went blank, and they said, "Our dad does not like spills," like,
Ooh,
scared.
yikes.
And I wasn't afraid because my parents were there, like, what's going to happen to me?
Yeah.
But when I saw the look on their face, I was like, at 5,
I was just thinking that. I'm like,
I knew at 5, this is not cool. Like,
Yeah.
you spilled a drink. Probably because I didn't remember doing this, but I probably spilled drinks all the time.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is not a big deal.
Yeah.
But I remember just seeing that, and that look is something I might have mentioned it to you like years ago when we first had our first son. Me saying, like, I never want to have that effect on our kids.
do you know what's so weird? I might cry. Oh, I'm going to cry. I can almost feel it. One of the core memories I have of us dating was actually me spilling something. I don't know if you remember this. You had your best friend, and I think it was his fiance at the time, had them over for dinner, and we were sitting out on the patio, and I spilled my drink by accident, obviously accident, on the table. And I kept apologizing. Like, as I was cleaning it, I kept apologizing. And you looked over and you were like, hey, it's not a big deal. Like, it was an accident. You spilled something. Don't worry about it. And like, the relief that was like unlocked in me in that moment was really freeing for me as like an adult. And so I think it's so interesting to hear you tell that story of you as a kid, the story of a spill being so formative for you and what it meant for you. Because then as you were courting me, as I don't even know if we were boyfriend and girlfriend yet, or if we were just, kind of getting to know each other, but it was so formative for me then. And really indicative of your character.
I mean, if you threw the drink in my face, I might have acted. It was an accident.
It hasn't happened yet. That hasn't happened yet in our relationship.
It was an accident. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, how dare you be clumsy? Like,
well, but it was also like the propensity to keep apologizing.
Yeah.
And I mean, in a way, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about early in this episode. But it was like, the one sorry was more than enough. It was an accident. Like, don't worry about it, was so freeing for me.
Yeah.
And so I think also if you could, going back to the answer the internet question, if you could talk about experiences that you've had where you either witnessed loud whatever that was, either traumatic or jarring or just something you didn't like, or identifying moments of the opposite where that softer approach was really what was impactful for you, the experiential sharing of what kind of crafted your experience of why you don't like loud, yelling, that might also be moving enough for him to say, like, you know what, maybe I do want to work on this, because it doesn't sound like he wants to, but it doesn't mean
because he thinks
never.
it works.
Yeah, I was gonna say he needs to know that other methods work too. And that's what I'm kind of getting at, is maybe you share how other methods can work too, ones that don't raise the tension in the situation, but that kind of settle the mud, so to speak.
To your point, I think overall it needs to be your husband loves you, he loves his kids. Draw on that. Look at how the kids are acting. Also, you could say, like, this makes me uncomfortable. I get uncomfortable.
So even if the kids are okay with it, as your wife.
You like to say, I get a cortisol spike to me. So
the cortisol spikes are a real thing. Moms, you can weigh in the comment. Like, when there's a lot happen, like the cortisol, when the kid goes, even if they're like pretending, like the other day, one of our boys was pretending, and they were like, help, help. And they were playing pretend in the room together. But like, my cortisol spiked even just hearing it. So
that's,
it's a real thing.
So
struggle's real, man.
If you share that with your husband, maybe that'll be enough. Maybe it won't, but go on the emotion of you. the children
Yeah.
how they feel when you do this. It's not just solving the immediate problem, but making sure you're not creating further problems where they're afraid of you or whatever. And I think that would be probably the best way to kind of bring him in a little bit. It's not just about the immediate success, it's about thereafter too. I think it's a great way to kind of
Yeah. A short-term win of obedience is different than a long-term win of respect and calm.
Exactly.
I'm taking notes, so
So good luck. I hope it works
keep
out.
us posted.
Or just tell them, listen, I don't care, the room's dirty. Stop yelling about it.
All right.
Anyway, it's been a great episode of Holy Matrimony. Thanks again. You can find me at James Fenimore _
You can find me at Trisha Fenimore. You can find the show at Holy Matrimony _ And now you can find us at thefenimores.com.
And it's also the Fenimores at YouTube and Rumble. So if you want to subscribe, that's a big help. And comment, like, all that stuff. Huge, huge, huge help for us.
Yep.
So
We've so appreciated the support of everyone subscribing, everyone commenting, liking the videos, sharing the videos. It's been so great to hear what you guys think of it. So let us know in the comments what you think of this episode.
we'll see you next time.